Hello, I'm Jennifer Nagashima. I'm a postdoctoral fellow with the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute, and I'm here today to interview my big scary boss, not really, the center head for the Center for Species Survival out at SCBI, Dr. Nucharin Songsasen. So Nooch, you're one of the hi, you're one of the world leaders in canid conservation efforts. But for those of us younger scientists out there, how did you initially get involved in the field?
Well, it's a long story. Well, but I will keep it short. So I came to the US. I'm from Thailand, and I came to United States in 2000, working at the Audubon Center for Research of the Endangered Species, and that was in 2000. And then I heard about the Smithsonian, right? A group with Dr. David Welt, who lead the reproductive science department out at National Zoo, and I always admire their work because they're using reproductive science in conservation. So when I have an opportunity to talk with him and his groups, I told him that I was interested in join the team. So he said, "Come on, join us, and then you can lead the Canid program because we don't have any." So I joined the Smithsonian in 2000. So to begin the Canid conservation program. So the Canid is a dog-like species. So we're talking about wolves, African wild dogs, foxes. Those are canids. So because of my background as a reproductive biologist, so the first thing is to starting the lab work to develop reproductive technologies to help maintain gene diversity of wild canids. So we use the dogs as a model because they are closely relative to the wolves and the fox and like that. And also at the same time, because we have the main wolves at SCBI, so I also start working with main wolves, looking at factors that impact their reproductions, because at that time main wolf reproduction is not doing very well. So we try to understand why they have the poor reproductive success. And from then, move on into the field research. I was so lucky to meet some of my friends and colleagues now from Brazil who study main wolves in the wild. So this is through the workshop that I attend, the neotropical workshop and neotropical carnivore workshop. And then we start talking about how we can use the reproductive biology and or physiology to better understand how human impact the main wolves that live in Brazil. So we started that project in 2004, and things just start from there. And from just studying domestic dogs and main wolves, and now our program that we call Global Canid Conservation Program has include the Dhole or Asiatic wild dogs, the red wolves, which is endemic to North America, and then the African wild dogs in our portfolio. And after 20 years, been working with Canid, so I'm now the member of Canid Specialist Group. So I'm coordinator of the Dhole working group for the Canid Specialist Group, where we have experts from all the range country that talking about Dhole conservation and how we can move conservation forward for these endangered species. And I think just that for a brief. But what about you, Jen? We've been working all together for this year, but your story also as fascinating, how you get involved in the field and your passion for the canids. So
Yeah.
why don't you tell us all about that?
Okay, well, I was just thinking that like you've not only worked with all these different species of canids, but in like all different areas, the ex situ stuff in different countries around the world, and also the laboratory. I only work in the little laboratory portion of it for the most part, but I was really drawn to the field and the research, mostly because I really liked Animal Planet as a kid and fell in love with conservation and endangered species. And I did an internship with SCBI when I was an undergraduate student, and was really surprised to find out how many different species of canids they were, and then also how little we knew about their reproduction. And so I was really, I guess, inspired to try to understand more about their reproduction and to help develop technologies that might be able to improve it so we could help these endangered canid species. And so I started doing that graduate program with you, using the domestic dog as a model and trying to develop things like in vitro fertilization or making test tube puppies, and growing ovaries in an incubator and understanding the hormone cycles of dogs so that we can eventually apply all this knowledge to the other species and hopefully produce puppies like my dog, IVF dog that's sleeping on the bed over here. Who's the best one of the litter?
No, I don't think so. I think mine's better. But you know, I remember the day that you came into my office and said, my goal is to produce victory puppies, so puppies from the test tube. And then I know how challenging it is to do, and I just kind of like, well, you can try, but you're just so determined to do it, and you are successful.
It was a big team effort.
Yeah, and now with you now produce the world first litter of test tube puppy. So how would you want to transfer this into saving the wild canids?
Yeah, so we're working on that now. When we were first looking at the issue of IVF in dogs, we were trying to figure out why it had not been successful over the last several decades of people trying, and had approached it from a lot of different angles of maybe it's the sperm, maybe it's the eggs, maybe it's the culture conditions for the embryos, and ended up tweaking a lot of different things in the process, and actually learned a lot of good lessons in terms of, always question, because there's always new knowledge being produced in the field, and maybe the stuff that was decided on as fact 40 years ago is not necessarily the case anymore. But for now, when we're transitioning all the things that we've learned in the domestic dog to the wild canids, the first place we've started actually is with the sperm, because we can get that a lot more easily from the wild canids than we can get eggs, since the ovaries are internal and they don't want to give them up except maybe once a year. So what we're doing right now is working on trying to optimize our sperm handling conditions. So collecting sperm from these different wild canids in zoos across the United States, working with the species survival plan programs, and testing different ways to incubate it that they mature and become able to fertilize eggs. So in the future, when we have some African painted dog or Dhole or Maine wolf eggs available, we can have the sperm ready to go to do IVF in those different endangered species.
Yeah. So you did mention about, a little bit about how female canids only have a week or two to produce an egg, right? So that is a challenge that we're facing in developing the reproductive technologies for the wild canid species. So I know that, our lab have been trying to solve this, challenge, overcome this challenging. The problem is that, with the canid, they're seasonal breeder, and then they only 1 week or 2 weeks that they will produce a mature egg that we can use for in vitro fertilizations. And in the past few years, you have been spearhead these new technologies, right, to help rescue some of these immature eggs to grow them into the point that to be able to fertilize with the sperm. You want to tell us a little bit about that? What a cool technology you are using now?
Yeah, it's super cool. So what we've been doing is working on what's called organ on a chip technology. So we're actually trying to basically recreate the environment of the ovary in the incubator. So one of the main aspects of this is actually introducing a mimic of blood flow. So these little chip devices, which they're kind of named after a computer chip rather than a Doritos, but these little devices where we can pump our culture media through that mimics blood flow and allows us to improve the nutrient availability to the tissues, or remove waste products as the tissues are living and surviving and growing, hopefully, in our culture system. And so what we've been trying to do is mimic all these different aspects of the natural environment so that we can improve our culture system and ultimately try to grow these ovaries, very healthy, fertilizable eggs from the ovaries of these endangered canids.
And that will be helpful for if we have the female that die during non-breeding seasons or die before she's sexually mature, and we want to to rescue and preserve her genetics for the future generation, right?
So ideally we'd be able to like freeze the ovaries until we need them, and then when we need them, we thaw them out and grow them in an incubator and get those eggs to do all sorts of IVF with.
That is very cool.
But we've talked mostly about the reproductive side. I'm sorry, that's my bias. But I know you have a lot of colleagues and collaborators from all around the world working with you on ex situ conservation. So can you talk a little bit more about some cool projects that you've got going on there?
Yeah, well, we do, I'm also the coordinator of the Maine wolf species survival plan for the Association of Zoo and Aquarium. So we have, we know with Maine wolves, always love of my life. Always, I work with different species, and Maine wolf always there. So we right now we collaborate with zoos across the United States to looking at reproductive health and also overall health, because with Maine wolves is they have this issue with gastrointestinal disorder. So I collaborate with geneticists who looking at microbiomes, actually the scientists from SCBI as well, to understand the role of gut microbiomes on the overall health. And why we need to do this, these studies is mostly because these wolves in zoos in captive situation, these are like insurance populations that could do something happen to the wild populations. We have these insurance population that will be ready to be released back into the wild. And in fact, my colleagues in Brazil and Argentina are looking at the rewilding of Maine wolves in Brazil and in Argentina right now. And we've been exchanging ideas of, the health and how to maintain the health of the wolves, how to monitor the success of the rewilding. And also I collaborate with other colleagues, for example, in Thailand, to study Asiatic wild dogs or the Dhole. So they develop the partnership, with all these, as you know, that conservation is not just a one person job. It's right. We need a big team of people. So a lot of these partnerships that I'm developing are a long-term partnership. Like my friends in Thailand, we start as colleagues, but now we're just friends. We work together, we develop that trust in each other and to achieve the same goal. And the same thing with colleagues in Thailand. So those are people that I've been working since 2007. So it's been a long time. So that's a long term, but at the same time, I'm also encourage the younger generation, right? Because wherever we work, Smithsonian scientists, we very good at capacity building, generate the next generation of conservation biologists, because conservation is just not one generation job. It's multiple generation, because it has to be long term. So all of that partnership, training the next generations is, one of my key I would say priorities for all these ex situ in situ work that we are doing.
That's so exciting to hear about the rewilding. I keep my fingers crossed so we can start sending some wolves into different Argentina and stuff in the next couple of years. So actually along those same lines then, what are some things that you're feeling particularly optimistic about these days?
Well, having you is one of my optimism, because someone the next generation like you who love science and passionate about conservation it make me optimistic, right? Because I see a lot of passionate young generation that want to keep this planet the way it is. So that gives me hope. And our better, yes, better, yeah, true. And also the awareness of people in the community. One thing that really brightened my heart this day is conservation of red wolves, which I said before that is endemic to the United States. Right now, this is critically endangered species. There are only less than 10 individuals left in the wild. So SCBI a few years ago organized this workshop, the Red Wolf Conservation and Science Workshop, that bring together all the stakeholders, government, non-government, people who should not normally like each other, do not want to be in the same room, but because the Smithsonian has this neutral for I think that our reputation, right? People trust us. So we were able to bring all these people who usually don't see eye to eye and come and talk about a common goal that is conserving the red wolves. And since then, the meeting was in 2018. That is like catalyst to that these people now talking together, working together. And then there's going to be the Red Wolf Recovery Plan meeting next week that I'm going to participate in and see all these things happen. And right just past year, there's a reintroduction of Red Wolf for the first time in, I would say, like almost 10 years. So it was very inspiring and very give me hope for the species in that, native to United States. So
Yeah. Great.
see, I'm smiling. I'm so happy when that happened.
I agree.
Yeah.
So I think that's all we have. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for chatting with me.